Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And I got to be honest, I am so excited about this guest. I get excited about all my guests. I love when I get to talk with such fun people. But this guest, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. And we're really going to have a great time talking about her story and, the company and the experiences that she has had. So let's just dive into it. And please join me in welcoming Kara Goldin to our program today. Welcome, Kara.
Thank you. Very excited to be here.
Great. Well, let me tell people just a little bit about you. So Kara Goldin is the founder and CEO of Hint Inc., best known for its award-winning Hint Water, the leading unsweetened flavored water. She has received numerous accolades, including being named EY Entrepreneur of the Year, 2017 Northern California, and is one of InStyle's 2019 Badass 50. Previously, Kara was VP of Shopping Partnerships at America Online, AOL. She hosts the podcast, The Kara Goldin Show. Her first book, Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters, was released October of 2020 and is now a Wall Street Journal and Amazon bestseller. Kara lives in the Bay Area with her family. So again, Kara, welcome.
Thank you. Very excited.
Well, your bio was short that I just read, but it's actually a lot more detailed. And as I was reading your book, okay, so hold the book up because I just had a digital copy. So you get to be Vanna. Isn't that so much fun? I love it. I love it. And so it was a wonderful book. And it is your story, but it's also a very great learning tool, maybe is the way to put it. But as I was learning your story, it was so much fun. And I always like to ask my guests, how did they get to where they are today and discover that look, I have my bottle of water here, my bottle of Hint water. I don't have a book, but I have the water. So how did you determine and make it to this point in your life where water and the other products that you sell, how this really is a passion in your life?
So I got here truly by accident.
Mm-hmm.
People always ask me, did you always want to be an entrepreneur?
Mm-hmm.
Did you always know you were going to be an entrepreneur? And the answer is no. I was a journalism major.
Mm-hmm.
I then decided to move from New York to the Bay Area and ended up getting my first kind of taste of startups. That was a spin out of a Steve Jobs idea, spun out of Apple. And we were acquired. You mentioned America Online. We were acquired by America Online. I ran their e-commerce and shopping partnerships for 7 years, $1 billion in revenue to AOL. Somewhere through being on many planes and not really living in San Francisco, I guess, on paper, but not really being there too much, I decided it's time to go home. I have 3 children under the age of 4. I wanted to take a little time. So I did. And I took a couple of years off and finally was getting to a point where I really wanted to get back into the workforce and go and do something. I kept thinking it was going to be tech, and I'm living in the right place in the country.
You're definitely in Silicon Valley there.
I've got the experience, but for me, it just wasn't really what I necessarily wanted to do. And I kept searching and interviewing and trying to figure it out. So on a parallel path, I was trying to get healthier. I had gained a nice chunk of weight over the course of my pregnancies. And I was having a very difficult time losing the weight and went on diets and counting calories and doing all of these things and nothing was working. I had also developed over the a little more than a couple of years, terrible adult acne, which I didn't even have as a teenager. And then finally, my energy levels were down. So I thought, while I'm taking kind of a break from working, this is the time to go and get in shape, start cooking, get healthy. And so one day, and again, almost giving up because I had tried everything around the food. I, changed up exercises. I was doing all of these things and nothing was working. That's when I looked down at my counter and my diet soda was facing me. And this is before I had to wear glasses, by the way. I looked down at my ingredients list on my diet soda can. And that's when I sort of questioned why I had never really tested that.
Right. And what
like
the heck even are all those ingredients?
Right. But also everybody around me was focusing on food. Watch what you eat. I kept hearing that, but I thought, well, there's a lot of things in here that I don't understand. So why don't I put that to the side and see what happens? 2.5 weeks later, I lost over 20 pounds. My skin cleared up and my energy levels it increased significantly.
Just from stopping the soda?
Yeah. And I was like, that's strange. Yeah. Why? Wait a minute. How did this happen? And then I really started looking at how it wasn't the most pleasant 2.5 weeks that I had ever experienced, but it wasn't impossible. I had made it through and I had seen success, right? And I thought there are so many people out there that are spending lots of money on diets, on, these healthy perception products that, in my view, at least in my own life, I view diet as health. And I thought, I stopped drinking it. I mean, that's just crazy that this is happening. And that's when I, really started thinking about, now, why was it that I wasn't drinking water before? Well, you and I talked about this briefly. Water is boring, not to everybody, but to me, it was extremely boring. And so I started slicing up fruit. Still didn't think I was going to start a company or be an entrepreneur.
You just wanted to jazz up the water.
Totally. Threw it in the water. And I said, now there it is. And, people said, were you trying to create a 0-calorie drink? Nope. I was just doing it for taste. And so then I was shopping at my brand new store that had opened in San Francisco where I lived, called Whole Foods. And I thought, now this is the kind of place that would really understand health and better products like this. I looked for this product on the shelf, water with just fruit in it. And I was shocked to see that there were a lot of, I call them healthy perception products that look like they'd be healthy. There was one in particular called vitamin water that had.
That sounds as healthy as it can get.
Right. It's vitamins and it's water. And I was shocked when I turned it around. They didn't even have a diet version of vitamin water at the time. It had more calories than a can of Coke. And I thought, wow, I have friends that are drinking this and they actually think it's health. So it's not just diet. There are a lot of words. And again, as my husband said, I think you have a lot of time on your hands right now. And that's why you're thinking about all these words like diet and low fat. But it's interesting. I remember thinking after I had sort of made it through that the decks are so stacked against consumers to actually be able to get healthy. And most consumers don't actually realize that. I didn't realize that I was just doing the wrong thing. And that's when I thought, if I can actually develop a drink, a tool that really helps people to realize that maybe it's something that you're doing every single day. Maybe it's not just giving up calories. Maybe it is, but maybe it's just that you need to pay attention and really understand whether or not you're really, doing the right things to attain health. And so I went back to my local Whole Foods and I said to the gentleman who was in the store, I said, how do I get a product on the shelf? Again, I'm a tech executive.
Right. And you just had this idea.
I'm curious, right? I'm curious. I'm a consumer. And he, said, I don't know. Like you have to bring a bottle. You have to have shelf stable product, all of these things that, again, my curiosity, and of course, I'm really interested in this topic. So I'm really listening. And I'm thinking, what is shelf stable? Like all of these things. And, it's interesting. I think about this now a lot, and particularly as I was writing my book, I felt like a lot of people have asked me over the years, why did you leave AOL? Why did you leave tech? Was it horrible? Was it too male dominated? They have all these kind of opinions about why I would
kind of
leave.
the obvious questions.
Yeah. And I've said there were a lot of men. Beverage has a lot of men too, right? There's a lot. I mean, but the thing for me that I felt that was really going on, and I couldn't articulate it at the time, was that I had been through what's termed a hockey stick. So the company America Online, as you remember, in the late 90s was like, boom, it was straight up. It was crazy.
Because it was the only game in town.
Yeah. And so, and then it started to level off. Thankfully, it didn't nosedive, but it started to level off. There were acquisitions going on. It was just, there was a lot more stability going on in the company. And as somebody who goes through this, and anyone who's been through kind of a high growth company, it's very exciting. It's very exhilarating. And then when it starts to mellow, you are forced to slow down in some ways. And in many ways, as a person, I was, the youngest vice president in the company. I was one of the few females at sort of that level. You also spend a lot of time, and particularly if you're adding lots of people, as AOL was doing, you're spending a lot of time managing and mentoring, which is terrific. But what happens to many, many C-suite executives is that you end up spending most of your time doing that and not really learning. And so I would say things like, I'm kind of bored. I'm not really, I'm sitting here trying to figure out what's next.
You're not challenged.
I'm not challenged, right? And I think that that's something that occurs for many, many people. And the higher you go in an organization, your role is to teach and to mentor and manage. Again, that's great. But oftentimes we forget about ourselves. And for me, and oftentimes, I also think that oftentimes when you're so busy spending time managing and mentoring and you're not actually learning, you also start to get angry, unhappy, right? You start, you're just human. You start to pick at these things.
I got to work on the budget today.
Right.
And that was something you never, ever wanted to do.
Right. And so I think that is something that I now share with many of my friends who are thinking, okay, should I go join a board? Should I go and do something else? For me, when I saw this opportunity in beverage, I was willing to go back down to the bottom, the entry level, however you want to look at it, and go and learn. And so when I was hearing shelf stable product, I was shelf stable product, writing it
what
down
does
as
that
fast
mean?
as I could. What is it? And then I was like, what does that mean? Okay, I'm going to go home and I'm going to figure this stuff out. And so every day I kept learning and learning and learning, and it was exciting. And I woke up every morning and thought, okay, what do I got to do today? Okay, I've got to get the kids to school. I've got to do this. And then I started working and I kept learning, and it was really exciting. And so I think that was for me personally too. And again, most of my network of people that I knew were in tech, and they were all like, wait, what are you doing?
You're going to sell what?
Yeah. What are you doing? You're starting a beverage company. Why are you doing that? But every day, because I was learning, and oftentimes, and still to this day, people say, yeah, but you went and started something new. And I said, I started something new, but the other piece of it is I was willing to go back down and be a little uncomfortable and know that I could fail and know that it might not all work out, but I could also be successful too. And that to me was just exactly what I needed.
Well, and it's a challenge that so many people face when they, by choice or, they're forced,
Yeah.
decide to start their own business. And we've talked about this on the program a lot, that they think, first of all, they have to know it all and that they can't ask
Mm-hmm.
for help. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's where that learning part comes in. You might not learn how to do it, but you learn how to work with somebody else who can. You talk in your book, you don't, even at the very start, you didn't bottle your own product. I mean, that was just not something you could do. And now you did the distribution. I love the stories about how you put it in your Jeep and you went, merrily on your way to deliver. But it was that I think is part of that entrepreneurial journey, is that learning process and figuring out, okay, I don't know how to do this. So either I need to figure out how to do it myself or figure out how to have someone else work with me.
Well, and it's interesting because so many people are frozen because they think that they don't have the right experience. They maybe somebody tells them along the way, as Whole Foods was sharing with me, you need to have a distributor.
Right.
I just kept thinking, okay, how do I find a distributor? Well, I'll go back into the store and talk to other people who are seem to be distributing other products on the shelf, and talk to them about it. But in the meantime, I didn't stop. In the meantime, I said, well, I'm going to load up my own. I'm going to be my own distributor.
Right.
And I didn't ask for permission to go and do that. I just went and did it. And I think that is the thing that people need to really know, is that you don't need to have all of the answers. It doesn't need to be perfect. And that is such an important piece. People have sort of labeled me as this like fearless risk taker and somebody that, just doesn't care and whatever. And I have never really thought about it that way. I've always thought, eventually I'll get a distributor.
Right.
Eventually but in the meantime, maybe I should just go and do what I can do versus actually stopping and saying, that's never, that's never going to work, or I have to get there. And I think that is really the difference. And frankly, no matter what industry that entrepreneurs are in, I've talked to many entrepreneurs and I found that it's the exact same thing, that you just sit there and, do what you can do. And as my dad used to say to me growing up, I mean, he said, figure out what you can do. And you're not going to always be the best at the sports or the job, but you're going to jump in and you're going to learn. And that really is fun. And putting yourself into positions where maybe you're a little bit uncomfortable is really, as I mentioned before, I really think that if you look around, those are the happiest people. And what's stopping you from doing that?
Right.
Yourself,
Yeah.
oftentimes.
It's
right?
that little voice in our head that is saying, we're not, and especially as women, a lot of times we're not smart enough, we're not good enough. And you talk in your book, I mean, it's subtitled Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. We get all those things that are, you're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to start your own company. You're not supposed to, and I talk about this a lot. People are telling us those things, and we're telling us, those things ourselves as a protection. We're told that as a little girl, little boy, don't touch that, it's hot. Right. And then how many times do we touch it anyway? But, they're trying to protect us. They don't want us to get hurt. Don't go into math. That's not for girls. And all of these various things. And then those things just continue with us our entire life. And I think a big part of the doubts and the doubters is it's their own fear. They're saying you can't do that because they think, oh, I couldn't do that. And so if I can't do it, you can't either.
Well, and I think that's right. And whether I think it holds for learning as well. I mean, we think that, whether you've got a high school education or a college education, it's somehow that's like the magic time. And then we stop along the way. And I believe that your whole life you'll learn, and you'll learn from your experiences. You'll learn. People have said to me, "Oh, I never should have done that job. Maybe it was a, horrible experience. Maybe you got fired.
But you
Maybe
should have learned something."
but I always say to people, stop beating yourself up about that, because you learn. Sometimes you learn what you don't want. I mean, I've had people who have said, "Oh, I went into a startup and it was horrible." And I said, "But wait a minute, what did you learn in that startup? Did you learn that you could actually take on a lot more than you thought? Did you learn that you could work in stressful environments? It wasn't what you wanted? Did you learn about culture? Did you learn, I mean, all of these different things. And I believe that instead, if you take it up a few notches and look at life as a journey, right? And that you're going to try lots of different things. And you're going to find the places where you learn the most, where instead of thinking that you reach this mecca by being a CEO or by being a director or a manager or, even living in a certain place. I always say to people that it's just, it's really, it's kind of crazy that we think that that's it. And those are the people that are truly the most unhappy, I think, are the ones that kind of set their head into one place, one job, one, one career, right? Instead of, and yet I think oftentimes we think that people are going to think that there's something wrong with us, right? That we make some kind of change.
Why can't you keep a job?
Right. And instead, I mean, it's fascinating. And I've thought a lot about this. And I think also teaching doesn't need to be school either. Right. You can learn a lot of things by going and taking a job, doing nonprofit work, whatever it is. And I really think that we need to sort of adjust our mindset and allow others to view us as, I'm on this journey, and it's not, this woohoo far out thing either. As I'm talking about it, it really is. I'm, I mean, I'm still, I'm running now the largest non-alcoholic beverage in the country that doesn't have a relationship with Coke, Pepsi, or Dr. Pepper Snapple, coming from somebody who had no experience in the industry. And I'm a founder, but I'm still the CEO. I'm still learning. Right. And people said, "Oh, come on, you got this." I said, "No, I'm still learning, and I will I will continue to put myself into positions where I love not being the most knowledgeable in the room." Right. And I think that is where people really find their resilience, their creativity, all of those things.
Right. And let's be honest, 2020 basically whacked us upside the head with that, right? And because we all were going on, a year ago at this point, we knew what we were going to be doing 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 6 months, I mean, all those various things. And then they said, no, and I mean, you're in California. California has been shut down much more strictly than many states, and all sorts of things. And I mean, overnight things changed, and we had to figure out, how do we work from home? Now, clearly, I mean, you can do what you do from home, but the management part you can do from home, but the actual product, I mean, still has to be done in the factories, and and still has to be delivered. I mean, all those various things, and so I think so many people really had to stop and think, what's going on? And one of the most fun things that I've loved watching, and I see this a lot, especially on Facebook, is what people are doing during this time. That and some of it had been just the basics. I mean, hey, let's cook. Let's bake bread. Bake bread was really one of the big things that took off, and or do puzzles. I mean, I have friends that are still doing puzzles, and obviously learning, reading, watching different TV programs. I mean, all these various things. They're learning to spend time with their family, which I think has been one of the coolest things that I have seen come out of this. And I mean, I've talked to parents who have said, we're keeping our kids at home. We like homeschooling,
Yeah.
and all sorts of things like that. And so that's been one of the good things, I think, about, if you could say a good thing about a pandemic, is how it forced us to, there was no box. When that box got taken away, and those that survived both personally and professionally really did learn how to adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's clearly, I think we're coming out of it. There are a number of people who are unfortunately dealing with companies trying to figure out, how they survive, or, still kind of the fallout of furloughing, and
Right.
what does that mean
Yeah.
for, in schools shutting down, and especially women, how many women have had to walk away from
Right. Yeah,
the
because they
work
all of a sudden had to
well.
be school teachers too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's been an incredibly challenging year. But even for those people, I also say, there will be a time when we will come out of this. I believe we will. And I think figuring out, maybe this was your time, your year to actually figure out what you really want to do. And
Right.
maybe you were incredibly happy doing what you were doing, but I think there are a number of people that are really resetting themselves.
Right.
And that, for me, the title of the book is Undaunted: Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. I mean, part of the reason why I really wanted to publish this book, this was my journal for the last 4 years, and I had been out public speaking. And people kept asking me, how'd you build a company without being a beverage executive
Right.
before?
You had no chemistry degree, nothing that would seem to make
No.
sense with all of that.
And when I would share my story about how I, was drinking too much soda, and it's very relatable story, but
Right.
also they said, okay, that's great. You gave it up, but then you go start a company and you're building this company. How did you get it on the shelf at Whole Foods and all of this stuff? And so I felt that just by telling my story along the way, people would write to me often on social media and say, I heard you speak at such and such event, and you really helped me to figure out that I could actually do something. I've
Right.
always had this idea for this. And so I think that the promise of hearing someone else's story and then relating it to your own life is something that people want. I mean,
Right.
they want to think for themselves. Maybe they have some idea that is out there, but also taking that a step further and figuring out what is the solution to that idea. I mean, I always tell, potential entrepreneurs that it's one thing to have an idea, but you gotta have a solution to that idea.
Right.
And then you've got to actually go and build with people that don't have the same skill sets that you think are really gonna go and push forward. And that's and at every step along the way to grow and grow and go. So I think that building a company is something that is people have always talked about entrepreneurs as the unicorns or the failures. I think there's a lot in between. There's stuff that comes up like a pandemic or not feeling like you can raise money and I really believe that it really is a mindset. And how do you put yourself into those positions to just keep pushing?
Right. And it has been interesting to see really how people have been rethinking. A lot of people by choice or by they were forced, they were furloughed, have started businesses. Or they've thought, okay, maybe I'm going to go back to school. Holy schmoly, all of the when all the universities basically around the world went into virtual mode, you could take classes in places you never thought you could. I mean, I had a friend who told me, she said, I'm taking classes from Harvard. And I said, oh, and she said, I don't even care what they are. I'm just taking classes from Harvard. And so, whether, and, trade schools, I mean, any of these various things, it's now we have these opportunities. And I think the universities are really going to discover You know, yes, it's obviously a money maker for universities to have students on campus because there's so many other things that they're charging
Totally.
for. But to be able to really expand who they're reaching, you know, and I mean, we've seen online universities for years. And so now it's going to be that combination, that hybrid of, you know, in person, because you know, let's be honest, there are some classes that you have to be in person for. Chemistry would be a great example of that.
Mhm.
Probably not going to have those things in your house. Music, theater, you know, sports. We were talking about sports before the program started. You know, even just that human interaction, you know, and I know that that's been one of the biggest challenges that parents have faced, whether they've got a 3-year-old or a 20-year-old. You know, we need those human interactions. And so I think we're
Yeah.
going to discover hybrids of learning. But I think it's a great time to be able to say, you know what? I want to take a class from Harvard. I don't even care if it's a basic English lit class. I want
Yeah.
to be able to say I took a class from Harvard.
Well, that's encouraging because it really, whether people know it or not, this is that lifelong learning. And again, it can be in an institution or actually trying to figure out, something else that you really want to do. And maybe you're sitting inside of, one of the stories I share in the book is with one of our employees, and he actually had been in finance for quite some time and was decided that he sort of heard about, and to some extent, finance was involved in some of the supply chain and figuring out different, margins and components of that business. And he was really good at it and was kind of the only person doing it. And after a while, I started thinking about my own experience and how there were times when, as I mentioned, I was really good and I was starting to teach, but then I was also not really learning. And so one day I asked him, I said, are you happy? And it's kind of a bizarre thing
Right.
for
He's
a
thinking,
CEO to
why?
say. I knew him quite well. And I said, are you really happy? And he said, of course I'm happy. And I said, are you learning? And he said, I'm very good at my job. And I said,
No.
that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if you're learning. And he said, I've already learned. And I said, that's what I thought. And I said, I don't want you to leave. He said, I'm not leaving. And I said, I know, but one day you will, because you'll be bored and you'll start getting cranky and start resenting. And you go through all these human patterns. And he didn't really understand what I was talking about. And I said, you should really be encouraging us. He was reporting into and still does, my husband and our chief operating officer. I said, you should really be encouraging us to hire some other people so you can move on and start to learn some other things. And I said, don't let go of the reins, hire 1 or 2 people and junior people to learn your job because you know it so well, so that you're still managing them, but you're actually working on a piece that you're actually learning. And so that's what we've done throughout our company too, where somewhere along the way too, when you're a manager, as I said earlier, you're not there. There's no component of your role that is just you learning and you taking yourself down to the bottom. And I really think we need to change that for so many people. And that's how we encourage people to, keep their brain working on, learning new things and using different components that they haven't in the past.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny, long ago when I worked in corporate America, and I know they still do these, well, if we were in offices, the brown bag lunches where you'd have someone come in and present on, say, LinkedIn or, a cooking demonstration. I remember we actually had one and, it was like, okay, this has nothing to do with business, but it was so much fun. We put our brain into something else. And it was interesting. I've recently discovered this little, it's an app, and I think it's only available on iPhone, but it's called Blinkist. And it squinches the books down into like 15, 20-minute blinks is what they're calling it. And the one I was listening to today was talking about, and it wasn't Apple, but it was one of the big tech companies where 15% of a person's time every day, they're encouraged to daydream.
Yeah.
And they said that's where people are getting their ideas because their mind floats free. And, and they might still be thinking about, okay, well, I have to do this and this and this, but somehow they're able to work through something different or come up with a different solution. And, how much of that do? We don't. We get so caught up in, we got to run the business. It's the old commercial, got to make the donuts, got to make the donuts, got to make the donuts. Right. And we stop learning ourselves, exactly what you were saying, and so even just 10-15 minutes a day of kind of that free floating, that thinking about something else, it can't be bad.
It's so true. And it really, you'll be amazed at how it really changes your mindset.
Right. And other things like taking a walk. I mean, doing those things that, especially as that business owner, and it doesn't matter if, you're one person in your basement or you're running, a multi-million-dollar company, taking a walk, doing all of those things that kind of shuts our brain off for a little bit, really actually frees our brain up. And I just love that concept today. And the bad part is I don't remember what the Blinkist was, what the book was, because I really should read the whole thing. I'll have to go back and look because it was very good. But yeah, we get caught up in running the business, or being that manager, or doing all of those things. And we forget, it's exactly what you were saying. We forget that we need to be nurturing ourselves. And I think, if anything, the pandemic has kind of helped that. It's given us that time. We're not commuting. We're not driving to I've home officed for over 20 years. But I spent a lot of time driving to networking events. I mean, I'm in Atlanta. Nothing is close in Atlanta. And so you drive there, you spend all that time there, all those, well, we're not doing that. So what are we doing with that time? The bad part is I know people who, they used to use their commute time to be listening to podcasts, all those various things. So they just need to shift and find a different thing. But yeah, it's, it's back to, it's the title of your book. I mean, it's about being undaunted by what's going on.
Absolutely. And that's the thing too. I think that when you put yourself into positions where, you are the learner too, you'll find that you're able to take on challenges. You're able to pay attention a lot more, trying to figure out, okay, now what's the best move? And so, when another few stories in the book that where I had challenges, it was, definitely easier for me to take on, those times and try and figure out, okay, what is the best thing to do here? So when, another Atlanta company, after a year of,
I love this story,
plugging away on, trying to get the product on the shelf, I, had fears. I was stuck. I didn't know what to do next. And a friend, took pity on me and said, "Oh, I remember meeting this gentleman, and maybe he can help you figure out shelf life and distribution and all
it's one of those big beverage companies based in Atlanta."
And I mean, I remember preparing so much because I thought, oh, well, he's got lots of experience and he is with a very large, multi-billion-dollar company. Of course, he's going to wave his magic wand and everything's going to be great as long as the meeting goes great. And after about 15 minutes of me explaining how we had gotten traction, we were still tiny, of course, but we had gotten traction in our stores in the Bay Area, he interrupted me and said, "Sweetie, Americans love sweet. This product isn't going anywhere." And I thought, wait, did he just call me sweetie? And I thought, this is crazy. And that's when I just sat there and listened. People have asked me, why didn't you hang up the phone on him? Why didn't you say, "Excuse me, what did you call?" I had no idea.
Honey.
I was stunned, right, about the whole thing. And that's when I continued to listen and realize that he was kind of going through the process. He was very nice, but he was going through the process of sharing with me what he had been telling all of the people below him. in the
Right.
company,
Yeah.
that this is the way we think about things.
This is the way we've always done it.
always done things. And when I got off the phone 45 minutes later, I realized that he never said the word health. He never, when I shared with him that I had gotten healthier just by switching to water, he, said, well, that's not reality. That's not what people are looking for. Consumers want zero. They
Right.
don't want, at the time, it was 10 calories was where we were at with
Mhm.
diet drinks. And that's when I realized too that it that innovation is harder inside of large companies. It's not you don't need lots and lots of experience to actually create new products and change things. You need to be curious. You need to have an idea and a solution. But that was really the window when I saw possibility, when I had those days for that first year where I was sitting here saying, if I just had the people with lots of experience, they would wave their magic wand and solve all of my problems.
They'd write those checks.
They'd write the checks, but they would also know what they were doing
Right.
when I realized that I didn't. And I share that story a lot with entrepreneurs too, because, you naturally think that with somebody with more experience that they're going to have in an industry that they're going to be able to do better than you. And the reality is you look at Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, you look at Steve Jobs, you look at Sarah Blakely at Spanx. All of these people did not come from the industry.
Right.
They did not come from the lots of years of experience, the multi-billion-dollar company, and then they went and started their company. And so that was really, frankly, when I had faith that it just took stamina. It took curiosity. It took a great idea and a team in order to create something that could actually be successful. It could also fail.
Right.
But there was a shot that it was going to be successful.
Right. Yeah. You just mentioned the word curiosity. And it's funny because when I was reading your book, one of the first things that struck me was that you're always questioning. And I thought about this and I thought, when you first started to talk, you didn't say mama or dada. You went, why?
I did. And I was a big pain. If you have a child that is always asking why, that was me.
But we should be doing that. And you talk in the book about when you got out of college and you went on all these interviews and you thought, I'm going to go talk to X person, and you just contacted him, and it's funny because I did the same thing, and I mean, at the very least, you get ignored or they tell you no. But if you don't say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about X, they're not, they're not psychic. And I remember when I first was deciding that I wanted to get into public relations, this was long ago, before the internet had been invented by Al Gore. And so I thought, okay, I want to do public relations. I have no idea why. I think I just thought it'd be fun.
Yeah.
And the Denver Business Journal ran this big story about this gentleman. His name was Swede Johnson, and he was the head of communications for Coors, one of those other beverage companies. And I was living in Colorado, and so I wrote him a letter, a physical letter, not even email, and I congratulated him on some award that he had won, and that was why they had done the story. And I just said, and I would, I'd love to spend 15 minutes talking with you. And I thought, poof, and then
I love
if his assistant called. He didn't call, but his assistant called and said, hey, Swede would love to talk to you. Can you come to Coors? I was going to move heaven and earth to go to Coors. And I did. I met with him, and I mean, he was just an absolute delight.
I love this.
Yeah, he has unfortunately passed away, and it's been several years ago. But one of the things he did was he picked up the phone right then and called 3 other people and said, you need to talk to this young woman. And all of these various things. And, they have since the Public Relations Society in Colorado has an award named the Swede Johnson Award now for the people who give the most. And he really was committed. I mean, you mentioned the word mentor a couple of times. He was committed to give back. if he could spend 15 minutes with me, make 3 phone calls, I'm sure he never thought about me again.
Mhm.
But if I hadn't asked him, it never would have happened. And I wouldn't
Yeah,
have
and I
gone
think
into PR.
yeah, and I think that that is really important. I mean, what's the worst that can happen,
Right. You
right?
get
And
ignored.
you get
Mhm,
ignored, people say no,
mhm,
whatever, but oftentimes you will find
mhm,
people. And, the story in my book from college, I frequently tell that story when I was getting out of college
mhm,
and I wanted to go find a job. I think that you're in a really interesting position when you're graduating from school where you do have people that are a
mhm.
little more established in their career
Right.
and are still pretty tapped in,
Mhm,
and particularly maybe they're at manager or director level, and they do know entry
mhm,
level positions and people that are searching. And
mhm,
again, you have to be willing to work hard,
mhm,
maybe you have to
mhm.
be willing to relocate, but oftentimes you're ready when you're
Right.
getting out of
Mhm,
school, you're ready to go
mhm,
somewhere.
mhm,
And so I frequently tell people, try and figure out what is the industry you
mhm,
want to go into. It's in many ways, I think it's so much easier to think
mhm,
about or research what company you
mhm.
want to look at as well, just by going on Google, right,
Right.
and searching around and
Mhm,
trying to figure out
mhm,
who are the top people
mhm,
that do that,
mhm,
right? And I think that then you try and back it
mhm,
out and try and figure out who in
mhm,
that
mhm,
industry and reach out to those
mhm.
people on LinkedIn
Right.
too and try and
Yeah.
figure out
Ask
uh,
for an introduction. You
yeah, and
know?
ask for an
Mhm,
introduction, but also I think there's so many opportunities now where a lot of these
mhm,
leaders and people who are in your industry that you want to get into are talking on webinars and
mhm,
talking on, this new
mhm,
app, Clubhouse,
mhm,
whatever.
mhm.
And you go into those conversations and, you just listen at
Mhm.
first and you really understand
Right.
what people are talking
Mhm,
about, and maybe you chime in and
mhm,
maybe you follow up afterwards, say, I
mhm,
was that person on
mhm,
Clubhouse that asked you that question.
mhm,
I just wanted to say I really
mhm,
appreciate you joining and
mhm,
giving, because that really helped
mhm,
me. And maybe you follow up again in a month
mhm,
and just say, listen, I'm looking for entry level
mhm,
opportunities, and maybe there's something
mhm,
with one of in your company or
mhm.
one of your friends companies. You'll be amazed at how many
Mhm.
people just want to help
Right.
you and other
Mhm,
people as well.
mhm. Well, and I think a lot of it is they're very honored in many cases that you're even contacting them.
Totally.
And uh, also when they reach that level, people think that they can't contact them.
Yeah.
And so when you do, you stand out. And so that I think is where it's fun is, and we do have the opportunity, especially because of social media and the internet and things where you can track down people, you can,
You can totally.
yeah, you can stalk them on Twitter, you can, all these
Well,
various
I
things.
have I have a really funny story about that. When I was first starting out a few years into my career, I was at CNN, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody, it was sort of, we didn't call it this back then, but it was like a late stage startup in the
Mm-hmm.
early 90s. And Ted Turner was still rolling around there.
Mm-hmm.
He was married to Jane Fonda.
Mm-hmm.
Got to meet Jane early on in the office, which was
Uh-huh.
a lot of fun. But I remember hearing about this woman who started another network called USA Network. And I was
Ah.
fascinated
Mm-hmm.
because all these men
Mm-hmm.
were starting networks. And
Mm-hmm.
Ted Turner, of course, was,
Mm-hmm.
the hottest
Mm-hmm.
topic in media. And I remember just reading up on her. We didn't
Mm-hmm.
have the Google searches, but we she was in magazines
Mm-hmm.
talking about why she decided and why she had the courage and all of those things. And so years later, I was up for an award with EY,
Mm-hmm.
Ernst and Young, and she was judging
Oh,
one
wow.
of the
Mm-hmm.
contests. And I remember meeting her
Mhm.
in that process. And I was kind of smiling and I said, I know all about you.
Mhm.
Here is this woman who started USA Network and
Mhm.
since then has gone on to be on many boards
Mhm.
and run
Mhm.
other companies. And USA Network was in the
Mhm.
early 90s. And I shared with her how much I knew about her.
Mhm.
And I said, oh, I know all about you. I said, you were just, I've, watched
Mhm.
you and
Mhm.
admired you from afar.
Mhm.
And it was interesting because just that little touch point
Mhm.
was enough for her to remember me.
Right.
And then I ended up being at a dinner a
Mhm.
couple years later, and she walked up to me and she said, I remember meeting you
Oh.
at EY.
Mhm.
I said, of course
Mhm.
I know who you
Mhm.
are. And we sort of joked.
Mhm.
And then she said to me, if you're ever raising money for your company,
Mhm.
I mean, here is a little girl, right, in her early 20s
Mhm.
who just admired her,
Mhm.
wasn't really sure. I mean, that's why I always say that the dots eventually
Mhm.
connect, right?
Mhm.
That I knew so much about her.
Mhm.
And so when she said that to me, she said, let me know if you're ever raising
Mhm.
money. And we were in the process of raising money. She and I went the next day to go and grab coffee.
Mhm.
And she is one of our investors today.
I love
But
it.
again, you never
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
but
Right.
when you pick people out,
Mhm.
when you pick companies out
Mhm.
and you do your homework
Mhm.
around those people, and maybe they're not helpful
Mhm.
today. Maybe you don't know where they
Mhm.
fit in today,
Mhm.
but you know enough about them to
Right.
sort of initially build
Mhm.
that relationship.
Mhm.
Maybe it's even just in your mind or it's
Mhm.
on LinkedIn or it's on
Right.
Clubhouse or
Mhm.
whatever. I'm convinced it could help you later.
Mhm. Right. And again, where's the harm in it? There isn't any.
Totally.
You're
Totally.
learning from them, and that's the most important thing.
Exactly.
I love it.
Exactly.
Well, oh my gosh, we've got only about 10 minutes left, and this has been so much fun. Oh, I was wondering, I mean, how has the pandemic affected you? Because, your company, for the most part, sells water through retail, but also, online. And how have you dealt with, and I mentioned at the start, you're in California where they shut down, and they shut down hard, which, I
Mhm.
mean, that's a necessary thing. But how has it been? What lessons did you learn from 2020?
I think that the most important lessons for me are that you need to do what you can,
Hmm.
right? And sometimes things will crop up that you
Hmm.
can't control. The pandemic,
Hmm.
you need to uh, continue to be uber aware.
Hmm.
You need to take care of your employees
Hmm.
and make sure that they're safe.
Hmm.
But also, sometimes when you don't know what exactly to do,
Hmm.
put yourself into
Hmm.
the situation
Hmm.
with your employees.
Right.
And frankly, that's exactly
Hmm.
what I did.
Hmm.
And that I had never managed during a pandemic
Hmm.
before. And so here's the CEO of a company who decided that the way that I could actually go learn
Hmm.
how to deal with whether or not our employees should be going into
Hmm.
stores during, at a time
Hmm.
when everyone's saying shelter in place, don't go into
Right.
stores. We
Right.
knew we were an essential product. We knew that we needed to actually go in and help the
Hmm.
grocery stores, merchandise, et
Hmm.
cetera. So I took on a route while many people who had been at larger companies before that worked at Hint were like, wait, she's not going to take on a route.
Right.
Oh,
No.
yes.
Hmm.
She went back to her roots,
Hmm.
to the beginning days, and started jumping in and going to
Hmm.
stores and pulling cases out of the
Hmm.
back room. Again, that's my way of
Hmm.
learning what uh, how that is this a safe
Hmm.
situation?
Right. What
What
were
else
they having to deal with?
yeah, what were they having to deal with?
Hmm.
Also, strategies around.
Hmm.
I found that going in before 7 o'clock in the morning, there weren't as many people in the
Hmm.
stores. And so I think that that kind of thing
Hmm.
is something that will always stay with me,
Hmm.
that as something that I've found really, really helpful in leading that
Mhm.
is really important. And when you don't know what to do, you figure out what the
Mhm.
problems are that you're, feeling,
Mhm.
hearing, and then you jump in
Mhm.
and become a, soldier with
Mhm.
everybody and try
Right.
and understand what the
Mhm.
situation is.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, it definitely, and it continues to be challenging. I'm assuming, I was assuming summer, we might be coming out of this. It's going to take longer, just because it's going to take a little bit longer than initially thought to get the people who want the vaccine, get them the vaccine. I'm very fortunate. I actually had my second shot already. And
Yay.
now I'm going to be really annoyed if they tell me in 6 months, got to do it
Yeah.
again. Um,
Yeah.
but I will. I got the shot early because I have health issues. I have some fairly major health issues, which is why I have to drink lots and lots of water. Um,
Yay.
but it's one of those things where, as we were saying, you just adapt. If I'm still wearing a mask in a store in December, then I'm still wearing a mask in a store in December. And but again, we're coming out of this with so many other cool things. We're figuring out that we can network online,
Mhm.
that as we said, we can take classes online. All of these various things that we're doing, I think, are going to continue. I think we'll go back to kind of hybrid situations,
I agree.
and but that's going to continue. I mean, I do an online networking group. I started it back in March simply because I wanted to see other people. Like, I got to see other people. And it has evolved into something that we do where we add an educational component, and so that people can actually be saying, okay, this is work related, I can do this. But there's nobody that participates, or on a regular basis, that's local. It's
Mhm.
people from everywhere. And that, to me, is something that I think is cool. Will I go back to in-person networking? I'm not sure.
Hmm.
And so, but that's part of this learning process. Okay, I didn't need to go to that. So maybe I'm not going to spend my time and my money doing that.
Mhm.
And it's fun to
Yeah.
go through all of this. And unfortunately, we know that there are people who have suffered tremendously. The loss of life, the sickness, the loss of companies. I mean, all of those various things. And that is obviously a very tragic thing, but I think there's so many positives that really can come of this. And that's what
Absolutely.
we have to be looking for.
Absolutely.
Well, oh my gosh, Kara, we really are pretty close to the top of the hour. So tell people, okay, be Vanna, hold the book up again.
Hold the book up again. Here
Hold the
you
book
go.
up
So,
again. So it
yeah,
is
so
called Undaunted.
Undaunted Overcoming Doubts and Doubters.
I
And
love it.
I think we're going to provide a link and then
Yep.
also Amazon. And I would love for
Mhm.
everybody to come visit me on uh, Kara Goldin with an
Mhm.
I all over social and come say hi.
I love it. I love it. And of course, now, what is Hint's website? Because you can order
And
online.
yes, drinkhint.com. And that also is available on Amazon and in all kinds of stores throughout the country, too. It's a flavored water using real fruit with
Mhm.
no sweeteners in it. And it comes in still and carbonated and caffeinated as
Caffeinated. I
well.
was like,
Yeah.
ooh, ooh.
Yeah. So, as you and I were talking about, we've got the
Mhm.
sunscreen, we've got other categories that
Mhm.
we've created as well that we are excited
Mhm.
to sell on our
Mhm.
website. So it's come have a look and see what's going on.
I love it. Yeah, it's was interesting that you did expand from just water. And when I saw what you did, so sunscreen, some masks, hand sanitizer, things like that, clearly based on the pandemic, but it made sense to me that you did.
Yeah,
And that you did it in a way that still, and we didn't even talk about this, still was so true to your vision for the company. And I think maybe that's
totally.
the thing that really was so important when I was reading your book is, when you've got that vision, stick with it. And you really did
Mhm.
talk in your book about how there were times where people wanted you to do things where you thought, nah, and we just can't do it, even if it
You
might mean the
stick
end of the
with it,
company.
and you
Mhm.
you stick with it, and you live undaunted.
Right. I love it. I love it. Well, do you have any final thoughts for everyone?
No, I hope everybody stops by to say hello and have a wonderful rest of the week. And thank you again. I appreciate it.
I love it. Well, I have been having an absolutely wonderful time chatting with Kara Goldin today. I am Deb Creer, and until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.